I'll tell you a couple things that people are saying, and you can tell me if you agree or not. They're saying if you were born in the United States, you are not Latino, even if your parents are Latino, one parent, both parents, whatever. They're saying if you don't speak your home country's language, you are not Latino. They're saying if you are a certain skin color, black or white, you are not Latino. If you aren't indigenous, you are not Latino.
Not gonna
So both of
they
you,
don't want any
you're
else.
already out.
You know I can't help these, cause they know they can never touch these. So baby, let me talk my shit, or I might just go another feed.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Stranger Fruit. My name is Constanza Eliana. I am so excited to be in the studio here in Los Angeles again with my beautiful panelists today. We are talking about what it means to be Latino enough. This is a conversation that I'm seeing a lot on Instagram in particular, but really all over TikTok, Instagram, YouTube is all over this. And I think it's very much a topic for diaspora kids, right? Like people who live outside of their home countries, outside of Latin America or Caribe. We have a very particular experience living outside of our home country. So I really wanted to have this conversation today. I'm so excited that y'all are here. I'm going to introduce our panelists for you today. We have Jose Richard Aviles. He is an artist and urban planner, born and raised in South Central LA, and the host of Fruta Fresca podcast and your favorite, Tia Desmadrosa.
A huevo.
Welcome. We also have Michelle Morales. She is a bilingual school psychologist and creative healing artist who utilizes movement as a tool for healing and self-empowerment. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And we have Daisy Romero. She is an entrepreneur based out of San Diego and Tijuana, Mexico, and the founder of accessories brand El Cholo's Kid. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I definitely wanted to get the conversation started around really Latinidad, because that's kind of what it boils down to, right? Are you Latino enough if you don't speak Spanish? Are you Latino enough if you're a certain skin tone? Are you Latino enough if whatever, name your thing. So Latinidad is something that I think a lot of us are really questioning right now. I think it means different things to different people. I think there's racial connotations to it. I think there's xenophobic connotations to it. And we're all just kind of trying to figure out, is this the best term that defines us as an identity, as a people, as a culture? So, Jose, I wanted to start with you.
Okay, qué fuerte.
Yeah, I wanted to start with you. Like, is Latinidad something that you really identify with, or do you think that it's just kind of not giving what it was supposed to give?
I think that's a very real question, especially in this time and place, in the ways that we've also been racialized, right? Because one, we know that human races do not exist, in fact, but we are also racialized bodies and racialized people. Do I use Latinidad? Not really. I think I use more brown as an identity because it's the melanin that I see reflected in my skin, and it's what I know. And with all of the colorism and anti-brownness rooted in anti-blackness that is stemmed in our communities, that I'm like, that's what I know. Like, I know what it's to be called moreno, or what it's to be called prieto, right? Or what it's to be like, you need to wear more sunblock so you don't get more brown or more dark. So I understand all of that. And I think because that is the oppression that lives close in my body, it's the only one that I know how to name as a form of reclaiming it. So I don't use Latinidad. I feel that as I've traveled back to particularly Mexico, so I am a putaco, mitad pupusa, mitad taco, pero siempre puta, siempre puta. But as I've been going back to my Tacolandia, right, to Mexico, and noticing how much my identity also fluctuates being in Mexico has been interesting.
Yeah.
So I know I don't use the word Latinidad or Latino or Latinx or Latinx or Latinx, whatever. The Latinx. Because I'm like, people be mispronouncing the word. I'm like, girl, you know it's not Latinx. Like, what? How you trying to pronounce it? It's Latinx, you know? So yeah, I mostly use brown.
Yeah.
So I identify as a queer brown person.
Yeah. Michelle, same question. What's your relationship to Latinidad?
I have, when it comes to Latinidad, I identify as Afro-Latina, or Black Latina. And I want to be honest that I will use these words interchangeably depending on the environment that I'm in, especially because my mom identifies differently. For instance, there's like, no somos hispanos, like we're not Hispanic. It's something that I often hear, but when I grew up, my mom was like, no, we're Hispanic. So for me, it's been like, what does it mean for me to be with the contradiction of it all?
Right.
And where am I at? Where's my integrity at with my family, with myself, with the people that I serve? I do primarily serve the Black and Brown community as a school psychologist. And so what I make a priority is relating to myself in ways that are more loving and that where I value myself, right? Because we've been conditioned to not, based on our color of skin.
Yeah.
And so for me, the challenge has been, where am I at with my relationship with myself? And then where am I at in regarding another when they have a difference of identity that I don't agree with? What is my responsibility here? So that's really what I think about with Latinidad. Like, I have a lot of friends who identify with Latinidad. And so it's been both like harmful, hurtful, and then also at the same time, I love, I love my friends, I love my community. And so what I've focused on is the ways that keep me connected to them, which is usually through movement, is how I focus on relating to difference and being with and bringing my voice in conversation with them. Fighting with them. One of the things that I've noticed primarily is like, oh, they're okay with me. Like, I've engaged with my responsibility in relating to difference or being with what they have. But once I bring my difference, or once I bring my experience as a Black woman, it's a different story. And that's been, I even get emotional as I talk about it, because that's been the toughest part in choosing love or choosing connection.
Yeah.
Where I have to distance and reevaluate and see, like, where am I at? Or this is never going to go away. So I feel this anguish or this desperation of like, where are we going as a human race? Like, what's happening here? So I get very curious about those things because I do care about creating something new. And so I do, in my experience, and also when I'm like in community, I'm just like, like it's just
exhausting.
There's moments, it's exhausting, and it's like, I have to ask, like, what am I committed to here in this moment? Like, I'm just gonna walk away.
I got you.
Or if we're like engaging in the conversation on Latinidad, I'm now more mindful of like, what does it mean for me to engage right now? Like, is this going to serve me? Am I gonna have fun? In the difference and the tension that comes up. If I'm not, because either there might be more ignorance in the room, and I don't mean that as like a demeaning way, but just more ignorance where they can't be with what I bring, and I can already smell that, then I'm just like, nah, no, I need to choose where.
Yeah.
So that's my relationship with Latinidad.
Yeah. Yeah. And Daisy, what's been your experience?
I think it's been like you're Latina, but it's been very specific to me because I've just always been Mexican, I'm not part anything, I'm just Mexican, and I've always lived by the border. So it's like a very specific culture. And I tell people, like, even like an LA Latino versus, or, a border Latino, it's a completely different experience because I don't go back to Mexico. I'm just there.
Yeah.
So border people, it's just, I'm in Tijuana every single day. Part of my business is there, but also I have lunch in Tijuana every day. I'm like back and forth. So it's like, that's always been my identity. So I didn't get, I haven't really had the opportunity to be like, oh, there's no one here that I identify with, at least growing up. Obviously, as an adult, that you go away to college and this and that, but growing up, my formative years have always been like, you're surrounded by Mexicans and you're Mexican.
Right.
It's like,
but there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, no, it's just like, this is what it is. But the thing with me that maybe was a little different, is that sometimes because I moved schools a lot, maybe, being the new kid and people don't maybe don't really know. I have had the experience of people like, talking about you in Spanish and thinking you don't understand because of the way you look.
Yeah.
And I was always a very like quiet kid or whatever, but I would have people, speaking about me in Spanish, thinking like I'm half Asian, or like people would, kids, I mean, when you're in elementary school or middle school, people would be like, oh, I thought you were half Japanese, or I thought you were half like whatever. It's
whatever they perceive.
Yeah, I mean, upon moving, but afterwards. But I didn't feel, I don't know, I didn't feel lost in that way because I was always, spending all summers in Mexico, all Christmas, helping my grandma in la tortilleria, pesando tamales, and, selling like this and that.
So you were like immersed in the
I was
culture.
immersed in it.
Yeah.
So when you're little, it's just like, oh my God, why are we always like moving back and forth? But now it's, there's that connection there that no one on TikTok is going to break with their ridiculous comment because I grew up in it, and I'm not, going to respond to your nonsense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think what I'm seeing a lot of the conversation being is really that sense of ignorance. Like, I think Latinos are really stereotyped in a lot of ways. Most Americans, we'll just stick to America for now. Most Americans have a very particular look and stereotype of what a Latino is, right? Most of the time, it's like my skin tone, light skin, brown. Maybe curly hair, maybe straight hair. And they don't really have a lot of room for the in-between, right? They don't have a lot of room for the gray. They don't have a lot of room for like all of the skin tones that we are and all of the racialized identities that we are. I want us to talk a little bit more about the concept of like not being Latino enough. So this is something that I brought up to the producers for the show because there's so much conversation about it online. I'll tell you a couple things that people are saying, and you can tell me if you agree or not. They're saying if you were born in the United States, you are not Latino, even if your parents are Latino, one parent, both parents, whatever. They're saying if you don't speak your home country's language, you are not Latino. They're saying if you are a certain skin color, black or white, you are not Latino. If you aren't indigenous, you are not Latino.
I'm not gonna
So both of
they
you,
don't want any
you're
out.
already out. Right? If you're not indigenous or don't speak an indigenous language, you're not Latino. The list goes on and on and on. So I want to know from y'all, what is the marker of being Latino based on all of our experiences, based on the culture that we're in? Why does the marker keep shifting and changing? Where is the line? At what point do you stop being Latino? And yeah.
I can't.
Sorry, I'm
This
on.
is where we get flamed.
Let's tell the
Right.
internet. Let's tell the internet.
I feel like I'm just being like, fuck, because I feel like it's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. So I was talking in my class. I was like, for example, I feel like what I now know about racialization and how race was constructed in the world, really, one would assume then I must then be, based on that logic, multiracial. Right, because there's like a colonizer ancestor and there's an indigenous ancestor and some of the lineage of who I am as a person. But I can't say multiracial in the context of the US because it implies white.
Right.
White and.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's not who
Yeah.
I am.
Right.
That's not in there. Like, I'm like, I still got to unpack Spain and all that. And then you're like, but like now all Spanish people are white because of like, hello? Like,
Right.
Ottoman Empire and all this stuff in Morocco. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. So I was like, damn, now I have like a lot of displaced anger. But I don't know. And this is why I go back to the political project.
Yeah.
Because I think for me, Latinidad is rooted in my oppression. I know the oppression of my skin more than I know the joy of my skin. And so for me, Latinidad is anything that strives to dismantle the oppression of my skin and is allocated to the liberation of my skin, which is why I go back to why pro-Blackness is not more what I need to be working on and not anti-racist work. You know what I mean? Because anti-racist work implies unpacking and dismantling and trying to do cultural strategy work for white people. I've done that shit for 15 years. I started at 15.
Yeah.
When I think about what pro-Black liberation means, it means investing in the joy and care and safety of Black people. I'm no longer here trying to,
Teach the whites.
No, I did
Yeah.
that for 15 years. I'm now here to defend my own. And that means also having the hard conversations with my own. So I feel like to wrap it up, again, Latinidad to me is rooted in the political project of it all. And it's rooted in the joy of the melanin of my skin. And a lot of what you said, right? The little people, and going back to that Costco and be like, bitch, girl, let me tell you what you about to do in 32. You gonna love this brown skin. So cute. So I would say that.
The internet disagrees with you.
Roasted.
Yeah, but I love that answer, and I wish that we could embrace that, take it in, soak it up, like bathe in it, and really embrace that as like the goal. But unfortunately, that is not the goal for most people. We mentioned Latinx and all the connotations that come with that, and so many people
the rage
fight.
it elicits in the comments.
Yes, people fight over this term, right?
Right.
And I want to ask, Michelle and Jose, you are queer. You identify as queer. You are very proud of being queer. And this whole conversation around the term Latinx, whether it is inclusive or exclusive, should we use Latine? Should we stick to just Latin? Like, what is this? Why do you think this is such a contentious term?
To be
Decide
real,
now.
to be real, I think it stemmed in the fact that we, as like a brown and all brown plus one, I guess, diaspora, there is a yearning for belonging, right? Because we don't know necessarily. I mean, in so many cases, colonizations, at least in the context of Mexico, 1521, and even prior to that, right? But like I think about how there's this yearning to belong, and then you add immigration to that, whether you are first generation or recent arrival. But there's all this constant need to belonging, and I think we still haven't figured that out as a diaspora, for one. And I think also my favorite, well, not my favorite, but I think the funniest thing is that the folks who are the most mad about Latinx, which was a term that was created to be more inclusive of gender, are straight people. And I'm like, what is it even about you? Right? And I think for me, I also am a firm believer of like, I don't appreciate cancel culture because it doesn't allow for nuance of relationships. Like I use they, them pronouns, but my mom calls me son and he, him, and I'm not going to cancel my mom. Like I know the relationship I have with my mother. I know that she is nurturing a femme spirit when she braids my hair and makes trenzas, or when she gets a bunch of face masks and saves all the floral ones for me. Like she is seeing the queer spirit that I am. So if you call me he, him, it's fine. I use that, I think, the same way to apply to the term Latinx and the constant discourse. Like I know who I am, girl. Like I'm cool. Like, what's up? Call me tia, call me tío, desmadre, lover, lo que quieras. But so I'm not offended by someone will call me Latino or Latina. Like there's a way to play with gender in that regard, I think. In terms to Latine, I'm a little mindful. And the only reason I say that is because Latina is such a Latin American term that it was created in Latin America. Latinx comes from the academy, comes from the academia. And there was a moment in time where folks were spelling Latino, but with the at sign, right? Arroba, because they had the A and the O. So it was like, so there's been different morphologies of the term.
It's evolved a lot.
It's evolved a lot.
Yeah.
And I've always, again, we were making a joke offline, but like, how do you pronounce it? Like, are we gonna pronounce this in Spanish and English and Spanglish?
Right.
Like, and there's no consistency around that either. So it's just so much like those aren't the real battles. Like to me, like I need you to take this energy around Latinx and remorphose it and put it towards the U.S. imperialist system that caused a lot of the immigration of a lot of our diasporas. First of all, put it to the colonizer. I think more of Latinx more than an identity as a political project, but I'm learning to identify what is part of that politic, right? So yeah, I again, I'm mindful of Latine because of coming from Latin America. I don't want to be a neo-colonizer and be like, oh, cute, adopt. Because that's so easy to do. You know what I mean? I definitely use Latine in Mexico more. I'm taking a class right now called Racismo y Xenofobia en el Contexto Mexicano, which is a certificate program through La UNAM. And one of the cool things that came out of that conversation was that we cannot talk about racism in the singular form, that we have to talk about it in the plural form, because what we're mistaking is racialization with racism.
Yes.
And racialization is the ideology that human races exist and that they're different. Racialism is then taking these differences and and adding hierarchy to
Yes.
them.
Caste.
Caste. And then the racism is a practice to maintain the hierarchy.
Yes.
So there's all these different concepts. And I say that to say that, like, for example, one of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn through these different trips to Mexico has been that the identities of my person only apply to the sociology of America. So when I go, so I know who I am as a queer person of color in the US, but I still am learning who I am as Moreno and a Jota in Mexico because it's a different sociology.
Yeah.
So I have to learn that. And I think the through line of it all, though, is queerness.
Yeah.
Because the queerness has made it consistent across the countries. And so it's been super cute to find a new sense of identity, but start within the queerness of it all. So I can be a Jota true and true fashion in the same way that I'm a queer person here, because it's so the same and yet different. So yeah, I don't know. It's people are just spending energy. Like, don't be girl. There's bigger battles at stake.
Right.
Like, our people are being displaced and gentrification and inflation. Los huevos
People are being
están
supported.
caros,
Like, there's bigger things to worry about.
100%.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because personally, just linguistically, I use Latine just because it's easier for our people to understand
100.
in Spanish. And then it's also easier for Americans to understand in English. Like, Latine is meant to be less gendered. And our colonial languages, whether it's English, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever, they are gendered. And so if you want to be much more inclusive and make a statement, which really is what Latinx is, it's to make a statement, to get people to open up, to say, hey, there is more than just our gendered lives. There are people outside of these like traditional norms that we have created that deserve just as much respect as everybody else. But because people get so hung up on like, but how do you say it? And it's not inclusive and it blah, 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 then we miss the point totally, completely. Michelle, I want to ask you the same question. Like,
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like, what do you think about this? And, being somebody who is queer, who is Latina, Latinx, whatever term you decide to use, what does that mean to you?
I feel like right now, as you were speaking, Jose, I was thinking, and as I was hearing you speak to Eliana, I was thinking, like, where have I been at, with all of this? Because I don't dive in the ways where, like, I'm learning a lot from even hearing you. I am noticing that I am kind of like in what does it mean to survive and live in a world that keeps changing these identities? So I'm really like observing, and I'm a witness, and also because I work with the Black and Brown communities, I listen, and that's all I really have. So I feel basic, but not, like, like I feel like, oh, I'm pretty basic, but I'm also like, but I care. I care about the people first. I care about the soul, the human first, and I don't want any of my ideas of identity to get in the way of me supporting, to get in the way of me relating, to get in the way of me connecting and loving. And so I pay attention to what is true. What is impacting us? What does this mean politically? I'm just listening and moving. So I don't have that. I have like a lot on those terms, because I'm just like really being and living.
Yeah.
And I actually do get pretty annoyed.
Let's be real.
I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in spending my energy there. I have better things to do with my time and with my energy.
Than to argue about Latinx.
Especially because it rarely includes Black folk.
Yeah.
And so I'm not interested. I'm interested in, like, what does it mean for me to be free?
Yeah.
What does it mean for me to be not only free and live and, like, see the beauty of life, right? Because there's, like, these conversations that take place, like, on social media, but it's also very distracting. Distracting from our own pain, distracting from our own grief, distracting from taking responsibility and like building those connections and looking beyond the social constructs that we were born into and still agree to follow. And so I pay attention to that because that is the only way I can stay alive and want to stay on this earth is like what does it mean to be like, you know, like to be with? There's impact, like there's a lack of resources and it depends on our identities and, you know, how we've been identified. And then there's like, we're human and there's more to life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, quite frankly, I haven't been interested. I just watch, but I don't forget.
Watch with the popcorn. Like, what's happening here?
What's happening? Or I get annoyed and I'm like,
yeah.
They're missing what matters.
Yeah,
they're missing what matters.
They're not talking about the real thing. And I think there was a post that was going around. I forget the actor's name, but he was kind of saying, basically dismissing Latinx completely and just being like, it doesn't make sense. It's not like none of my family understands how to use, like, that's not a term. It's an American term. And I had placed in the comments, like, they are correct in the sense of the language that because if you aren't from a country, in particular Mexico, where the X is constantly used in a specific way linguistically, like in Taino, we, you know, that's not a thing. Like in El Caribe, we don't really use the X that much. And we don't pronounce it in the same way. And so Latine makes a lot more sense. And for a lot of other countries, it makes more sense. So in that way, I kind of understand. But to completely dismiss the origins of it, I think are what people are steering away from. They're just thinking like, oh, this is a gringo-based term. Whether they're right or wrong doesn't matter. It's more so about the wanting to be inclusive really pisses straight people off. It really does. And in particular in our cultura where machismo is so fucking prevalent, it's really difficult to get people, in particular, a certain type of mindset to just like start embracing that, hey, there are other genders other than just you and your heterism.
Yeah, that is something that sticks out to me every time because I do feel the disconnect, you know, but when I think about these things, I'm just like, when I hear someone bring up their identity or even when I see a straight person get upset, I like to just get curious. And if I'm too triggered, then I just have to step away.
Yeah.
Because it's yeah.
We can be spicy.
It can be very spicy.
And when we think we're right and we're actually wrong, we don't like it very much.
Yeah. Making space to learn.
Yeah.
And to like listen, like, oh, that's what you have. You know, like not like that's cool. Like I'm like, you know, it's just more like, oh, okay. Like instead of me having an idea of how you should identify or what you should, I know that there's like such a closed off approach to queerness in the heterosexual community. And that feels scary. That feels dangerous to me sometimes. So I have to like, to engage in conversation. I feel like I feel like I have a lot of PTSD around being Black and queer. And so I'm still learning what it means to be in conversation in ways that feel safe to me. Or to be, you know, in el chisme, you know, for fun, to just learn. Like I still experience like like, I don't even know what that means to you and I don't want to know. But I'm still like owning and feeling safe in what it means to be Black and queer.
Yeah. Love that. So we did talk a little bit about like the racialized component of Latinidad. As I mentioned earlier, we kind of represent all different skin tones, all different racialized identities. And that was really important to me for this episode because, again, I feel like we are so stereotyped and there's so much xenophobia around Latinos in general, in the United States in particular, that it was really important for me to have as many people that actually represent our countries.
I think Twitter After Dark is an innovative creation, like for young folks. I think that it has demystified the idea of what sex is. Like a lot of stuff that's on Twitter or Twitter After Dark, however you want to call it, are amateur folks that do their own work that like are having these relations with people that they know, their homeboys, their homegirls, or whatever, somebody that they're frequently intimate with, and you get to see real sexual acts rather than something in a production or like somebody that's directing it.